Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gurvani Pacharine Nidvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srimad Bhagvatam Grantaraj Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I have received homework from Shritan Prabhu, from Krishna Prabhu, and from Sai Tumala. Prabhu. Okay. So, let's start with Shritan. And also from Dhananjaya Prabhu. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that. So it says, read Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.1 to 6.3.12 verses chapter 3 and analyze what Yamaraj says and write a summary of it. Look up Srimad Bhagavatam 2.2.34 and Bhagavad Gita 2.42-43 and write an essay on what is Vedavada Rata. Good. So question 1. The Yamadutas being confused and approached their master, meaning Yamaraj, with two questions. Who are the four beautiful people, Vishnudutas? Why has your word been defied by these people? Are you their real master? Okay. To these questions, Yamaraj, one of the 12 Mahajanas, a devotee of the Lord, one of the 12 Mahajanas answered, I, Yamaraj, Indra, the king of heaven, Nriti, Varuna, Chandra, the moon god, Agni, Lord Shiva, Pavana, Lord Brahma, Surya, the sun god, Visvasu, the 8 Vasus, the Sadyas, the Maruts, the Rudras, the Siddhas, and the Marichi, and the other great rishis engaged in maintaining the departmental affairs of the universe, as well as the best of the demigods headed by Brihaspati, and the great sages headed by Bhrigu, we cannot understand the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. From this, we know that all the demigods and people residing on the different planetary systems, he restates the same point in verse 20 and 21, putting more emphasis on the fact that he was not the supreme controller. He then explains the position of the Vishnudutas in verse 18 are hinted to be the Lord's devotees. Yamaraj says that the devotees of the Lord, the Vishnudutas, are described to be the protectors of devotees, and they are similar to Vishnu in bodily features. Yamaraj also answered the question of why Ajamila was liberated. He explains in verse 23 and 24 that one who chants the holy name is freed from sinful reactions and is protected by the Lord. Okay, so that's question 1. Question 2, Vedavadaratas are people who believe that the purpose of the Vedas is to perform ritualistic ceremonies to have more sense gratification. The Vedas don't only talk about Krishna, rather they talk about ways to gradually elevate oneself, which people use for sense gratification. The true point, which the Vedas state, is that Krishna is the supreme. People who don't accept this are the Vedavadaratas. Okay, thank you, Shritan. And then Krishna Prabhu. Let's see what Krishna says. Okay, read Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.1 to 6.3.12 and analyze what Yamaraj says and write a summary of it. Through Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.1 to 6.3.12, Srila Yamaraj was very pleased that his order carrier said the name of Narayana. Yamaraj is a great devotee himself. Yamaraj told his carriers that there is a main controller above him and everybody, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yamaraj said that he only controls some people that are sinful, but the Supreme Personality is the Supreme Controller who has control over everything and everyone. Okay, good. And look up Srimad Bhagavatam 2.2.34 and Bhagavad Gita 2.42 and 43 verses and write an essay on what is Vedavadarata. Okay, so Krishna's answer. Vedavadaratas are people who use the Vedas for the purpose of the fruit of results rather than to connect with the Supreme Lord. In an explanation of the Vedavadaratas, Srila Prabhupada writes, they, the Vedavadarata, are most attached to the fruitive activities recommended in the Karmakanda portion of the Vedas. They do not want anything more than sense gratificatory proposals for enjoying life in heaven. In the Vedas, many sacrifices are recommended for elevation to the heavenly planets. Anyone desiring elevation to heavenly planets must perform these sacrifices, and men with a poor fund of knowledge think that this is the whole purpose of the Vedic wisdom. Bhagavad Gita 2.42-43. Vedavadaratas are attached to the results of the Vedic activities and disregard the main goal of going back to Godhead as a negative result. They chase after the fruits of the sacrifices and austerities used in going back to Godhead. They think the purpose of Vedic wisdom is to advance in sense gratification. The Vedavadaratas give their own explanations of the Vedas, neglecting the authority of great teachers or acharyas. They also tend to raise some unscrupulous person from among themselves and present him as the leading exponent of Vedic knowledge. Ishopanishad point 9, or verse 9. Many Vedavadaratas ditch the original Vedic teachings and speculate or create their own false theories. Different societies make up their own rules of following the path to Godhead so they can optimize them for sense gratification instead. These types of societies are most prevalent in India. Okay, very good. And then Krishna writes, questions I have. Do Vedavadaratas worship the demigods for some type of material benefit, like wealth, knowledge, health, or longer life, strength, protection? Is worshiping the demigods for these benefits right? Okay, well, the Vedavadaratas basically reject Krishna and look at other things and people as authorities. So they reject the authority of Krishna. That's the main point about Aveda Vadarata. And that was said, let's see, that was said in okay, one second. Let me just get the exact quote. So, looking at the second chapter, right, okay. Okay, so, if we look in 18th chapter, 66th verse, that, of course, is Sarvadharma Prityaja Mami comes to the Nambraja. Let's see what it says. 18th chapter, 66th verse. It says, okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam, so where is this? 2, 3, 2. Okay, on 2:33, Srimad Bhagavatam, second chapter, it says, in the second chapter, I don't have it with me, but the second chapter, the second canto, second chapter, verse 33, it says that whoever doesn't accept any conclusion, or whoever has any conclusion different than Sarvadharma Parityaja is a Veda Vadarata. So any person who has a different conclusion than surrendering to Krishna as the ultimate Supreme Personality of Godhead is a Veda Vadarata. So in answer to your question, Krishna, which is a good question, and it's a valid question. Veda Vadarata people reject the idea that Krishna is the Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, and therefore they may worship demigods for some type of material benefit, like wealth, knowledge, health, strength, protection. Okay? So your question, Veda Vadaratas worship demigods for some type of material benefit, like these things. So is worshiping the demigods for these benefits right? No, it's not right, because ultimately it'll keep a person in the material world, because in order to get those benefits, wealth, knowledge, health, strength, protection, you would have to take birth again. So therefore, and then Krishna also, so you're saying, is worship of demigods right? So then in the, also the 7th chapter, of Bhagavad Gita, verse number 23. It says, men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. So that's 723. And then 7, and then the 9th chapter, let's see what that says. It says, ninth chapter, verse number 24. I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. Okay, so, and then the next verse, 9th chapter, 25th verse says, those who worship demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. And those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. So the worshippers of the demigods will never get out of the entanglement of the material world. They'll always stay entangled. And those who are devotees of other, and then 9th chapter, 23rd verse, those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong way. So Prabhupada in the purport to 923 says, everyone is to offer his worship to the Supreme Lord only. That will automatically satisfy the different officers and directors of the world, of the Lord, meaning the demigods. The officers and directors are engaged as representatives of the government, and to offer some bribe to the officers and directors is illegal. This is stated here as avidhi purvakam. In other words, Krishna does not approve the unnecessary worship of the demigods. So there you are, your answer, Krishna. 9, 23, 24, 25, 7, 23, and also 720. That's the answer to your question. Okay. Now Krishna has another question. Let's take a look at that. And this is good, asking questions. 5 days ago in school, we had a topic on a part in Homer's The Odyssey. In one part of the book, to win over a great queen, the main character, Odysseus, I guess, had to hold a bow that most others could not hold, string the bow, and hit a bullseye. This is very similar to the event in Ramayana that led my classmate. Then my classmate said that why I don't believe any of these epics are real. They all follow the same pattern. What would I think of this? And what would I respond? The question can wait if this is off topic. So basically, Krishna's question is, there seems to be a similarity between the Odyssey of Homer and especially this one part of this, the epic story where the main character holds a bow that others cannot even, I guess, lift, string the bow, and hit a bullseye. And it's very similar to Lord Rama when he wins the hand of Sita. He has to do the same thing. It's more complicated. He has to first of all, lift this bow that belonged to Lord Shiva that no one else could lift, then string it, which is extremely difficult because the bow is so heavy, because you have to bend the bow in order to string it, and then hit the eye of a fish that is hanging from a very high ceiling, and there is some kind of obstacle just below the fish, and he has to hit the eye of the fish through the obstacle without looking at the fish, and Lord Rama is able to do it. It's a little more complicated than what's in the Odyssey of Homer. So then one of Krishna's friends speculated that he doesn't believe in any of these epics. Mainly he's saying he doesn't believe in the Ramayana because the Greeks have the same story, same type of story in the Odyssey of Homer. Well, that just shows how ignorant your friend is, Krishna. And this proves one thing, that the Ramayana, which was written over 1.7 million years ago, was the inspiration. Well, if it was written 1.7 million years ago, it was also known in India in the time of that the Greeks or Homer wrote his poem. So he knew about it because Greece and India had long-standing relationship for commerce. And don't forget that Alexander the Great conquered parts of India, and meaning like before Afghanistan, what's modern Afghanistan and what's modern Pakistan were parts of India at that time, 5,000 years ago. And 2,500 years ago, when Alexander invaded the certain parts of India, he was not able to conquer all of India, but he did conquer some parts, like what's modern Afghanistan. And he set up his generals as rulers of those areas that were conquered. And that's why the Afghans and some Pakistanis and some people like the Punjabis, they look like Europeans. Some of them look like Europeans because the Greeks intermarried with the people that they conquered that were parts of what's called India, and 2,500 years ago. And they lived there and they assimilated with the local people. So there's something called the Heliodorus column, which was discovered in the 1870s in South India. And it was a column that's still there today. You can visit it. It's called Heliodorus column. You can look it up on the internet. And it was built by an emissary from a Greek king who was one of, I guess, either a general or a descendant of the general of Alexander the Great's army, who was ruling over parts of modern Afghanistan, and that was like an extension of Greece, and because they were Greeks, and he sent an emissary to the king of Andhra Pradesh in India, and this emissary, or like ambassador, he converted to becoming a devotee of Krishna, and he built this column in which he claims, my name is so-and-so, I was sent here by King so-and-so, the Greek king of this extension of Greece in what's modern Afghanistan. And I converted to becoming a devotee of Krishna. So this is proof that ancient Greece and India had many political, economic, and cultural exchanges, at least 2,500 years ago, and probably way before that. And that's why Homer was aware of Ramayana history, and when he wrote his history, he most probably copied some things in that story. Now, that story is not fictional, because there was such a place called Troy, and the whole story is about how this queen was kidnapped from Greece and then taken by a king to Troy, and her husband tries to get her back. And in order to win a battle against the city of Troy, he builds this Trojan horse and hides all the soldiers in the Trojan horse, and he gifts it to Troy. And it's this gigantic horse, and they accept the gift. And then that way, the soldiers from Greece, they sneak into the city through this gigantic horse, and eventually they attack from the inside, and then there's attack from the outside, and they defeat the king in Troy, and the queen is liberated. That's a quick, short summary of the history. Now, people thought that this history of the travels and the efforts of Odysseus to get his wife back was fictional. But one man in the 1880s, an Englishman, thought, what if it wasn't fictional? That means that the city of Troy actually exists. But nobody knew where it was. So he started studying old maps and reading the history, Homer's Odyssey very carefully, and he made an assumption that he would find the city of Troy in northern Turkey. And therefore, he got some investors in England, and they gave him money, and he organized an archaeological expedition, and he got permission from the Ottoman Empire to go with this group of experts and try and find the ancient city of Troy. And they found it. It's one of the greatest archaeological finds in the history of the world. And they proved that, and because they found the city of Troy, it was it was underground because it had been abandoned for 2,500 years, but they were able to find it, and it proved that the history of Homer's Odyssey is not fictional; it's actually factual, right? That doesn't mean that the Homer's depiction of the history about a king who lifts a very heavy bow and shoots a target and so forth. He borrowed that from the Ramayana and put it into a story. Okay, so this only proves that India's culture has influenced the Greeks and many other cultures all around the world. And even in more modern times, King Akbar and then his son, one of his sons, translated many Vedic literatures into Persian or Farsi, and later on those Farsi translations of Vedic histories, like the Mahabharata and others, were translated into Arabic. And this way, this influenced also the Muslims, the Parsis, and then the Persians, and then the Arabs, and eventually that went into Europe. Those translations were further translated into European languages. So India has always been a source of culture from the most ancient times up to today also. Just like Prabhupada spread knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam all over the world. So your answer to your question, Krishna, is that this the Homer's Odyssey proves that the original culture of India was instrumental. Though many things were borrowed from the Ramayana and the Vedas by the Europeans, such as the Greeks and others. Okay, Haribol. So now next, we got homework from Samart, and then Sanmukh, and also Sai Tumala, and also I think Dhananjaya. Let's look at Dhananjaya's. Dhananjaya writes, Yamraj is one person of many that have responsibilities, in reference to multiple demigods. The Supreme Controller is all-pervading, and at the same time he has manifested part of his personality in the following people. Vishnu in charge of goodness and creation, Brahma in charge of passion and maintenance of the universe. That's incorrect. Brahma is in charge of creation and in the law and in charge of the mode of passion. Vishnu is in charge of maintenance of the universe, and Shiva is in charge of under the mode of ignorance and the destruction of the universe. So you can make that little correction, Dhananjaya. There are two analogies to explain Krishna's all-pervading qualities. A person steering a bull uses a rope, and that rope is like Krishna. Cloth is made of fabric, and this fabric is made with string going lengthwise and widthwise. The woven nature of the fabric is like Krishna's all-pervading quality, meaning Paramatma. Bhagavad Gita goes into more depth in the all-pervading qualities of Krishna. Okay, so this is a summary, I guess, Dhananjaya, of the 12 beginning verses of the third chapter of Canto 6. Is that right? Yeah. Yep. And then Bhagavad Gita goes into more depth in the all-pervading qualities of Krishna. Bhagavad Gita 7:7, O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. This verse does not negate the personal aspect of Krishna's potencies. It only adds details. Krishna is supporting the whole manifestation. He is the origin of spirit and matter. Bhagavad Gita 14:27. The Brahman effulgence is spread everywhere. Bhagavad Gita 9:4. By me, in my unmanifested form, the entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So that's referring to Paramatma. With support from the purport, quote, here it is said that although he is all-pervading, everywhere present, he is not conceivable by the material senses. And just as the sunshine is spread all over the universe, the energy of the Lord is spread all over the creation, and everything is resting in that energy. And then Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.12. In this lecture, fire, heat, and light are used to help describe Krishna's potencies, as is the sun. Its light and heat are supporting the entire universe. Verse 13, summary. The Supreme Personality of Godhead binds everyone by the rules of the Vedas. With Varnashram Dharma rules properly functioning, people will be better situated to give up lording it over material nature, live in harmony with everyone else, and be more able to realize that the absolute truth is Krishna. Okay? Very good, Dhananjaya. All right, so then we have Sai Tumala. And he says, read Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.1 and to 6.3.12 and analyze what Yamaraj says. Look up Srimad Bhagavatam 2.2.34 and Bhagavad Gita 2.42-43 and write an essay on what is Veda Vadarata. So, Sai writes, when Ajamila was calling for his son, he indirectly chanted the name of Narayana. So when the Yamadutas came to take Ajamila's soul, the Vishnu Dutas appeared and took Ajamila's soul to Vaikuntha. No, they didn't take him to Vaikuntha. They liberated him from the Yamadutas and gave him a chance to go back home, back to Godhead, to Vaikuntha. And therefore he went to Haridwar, and he began meditating on the Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and purified himself. And then, by meditating on Krishna, he went back to Godhead. But seeing that the Vishnudutas basically impeded or stopped the Yamadutas from taking Ajamila, the Yamadutas became very disturbed and went to their master Yamaraj. So you have to correct that little part there, Sai. After hearing what happened, Yamaraj explained that you have accepted me as the Supreme, but I am not. Lord Shri Krishna is my master. He is the topmost in all the planets and universes. He manifests as Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva and controls the maintenance and annihilation of the material world. Everything is controlled by him, like a bull is controlled by a rope in its nose. So that's, I guess, your summary of those 12 verses. Okay, and the second question, Vedavadaratas, are people who are attracted to the flowery part of the Vedas where it explains how to get gold, women, wine, or go to the heavenly planets. But Lord Brahma read the Vedas, all of them, 3 times, and understood that the purpose of the Vedas is to advance in Krishna consciousness. Very good. The Vedavadaratas read the Karmakanda section of the Vedas for their own sense gratification, but the Vedas are actually about Krishna, consciousness. Lord Brahma carefully studied and understood them and realized this. We should understand and follow the Lord, and follow what Lord Brahma read or understood and said, because he is an authority and he read them 3 times. Okay. All right, Sai, thank you. Yeah, so Vedavadaratas do not accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they have a different conclusion than the Vedas about what is the purpose of life. Okay, next, I guess Sai also sent in the homework by his sister, and I want to thank you for that. Okay, so Samart, let's see what he says. He writes about Vedavadaratas. Okay, he didn't answer the summary, he just answers the Vedavadaratas. He gives a pretty complete explanation of the Vedavadaratas. So, as a summary, he says, the Vedavadaratas are most attached to the fruitive activities recommended in the Karmakanda portion of the Vedas. They do not want anything more than sense gratificatory proposals for enjoying life in heaven, where wine and women are available and material opulence is very common. They think that this is the whole purpose of the Vedic wisdom. It is very difficult for such inexperienced persons to be situated in the determined action of Krishna consciousness. Such persons have no faith in liberation from material bondage, and they are very much attached to the pompous ceremonies of Vedic sacrifices. They are purely attached to such material temporary sacrifices as the Lord of the material world. According to the Ishopanishad Mantra 9, it is said, those who are Vedavadarata pose themselves as very learned in Vedic literature, but unfortunately they are completely diverted from the purpose of the Vedas. Some examples of Vedavadarata people are modern Hindu priests who perform sacrifices and pujas for material gains and charge money. They do not explain that the aim of life is to love God, but they tell that one should pray to live long and be rich. They will encourage you to do pujas and sacrifices for getting a job, getting married, passing the SAT, and getting promotions. They promote business transactions with the Lord by telling, if you do this, you get this. Very good, Samart. Jai Shri Radha Nilamadava Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine. Okay, so then we're going to continue, and then I'm going to give you homework for next week. So in text, the 6th canto, chapter 3, text 13, it says, just as the driver of a bullock cart ties ropes through the nostrils of his bulls to control them, the Supreme Personality of Godhead binds all men through the ropes of his words in the Vedas, which set forth the names and activities of the distinct orders of human society, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. In fear, the members of these orders all worship the Supreme Lord by offering him presentations according to their respective activities. In this material world, everyone is conditioned, regardless of who he is. One may be a human being, a demigod, or an animal, tree, or plant. But everything is controlled by the laws of nature, and behind this natural control is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 9.10, where Krishna says, Maya dakshina pakriti suyatesa characharam hetanani nukonte jagat viparivartate. The material nature is working under my direction and producing all moving and non-moving beings. Thus, Krishna is behind the natural machine which works under his control. Yes. So this is also, let's see. Okay, let me finish this purport. Apart from other living entities, the living being in the human form of body is systematically controlled by the Vedic injunctions in terms of the divisions of Varna and Ashrama. So human beings in the human form of body are further controlled, as opposed to the other living entities, are further controlled by the Vedic injunctions, by dividing them into these varnas and ashramas. A human being is expected to follow the rules and regulations of varna and ashrama, otherwise he cannot escape punishment by Yamaraj. Very interesting. The point is that every human being is expected to elevate himself to the position of a Brahmana, the most intelligent man, and then one must transcend that position to become a Vaishnava. This is the perfection of life. The Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra can elevate themselves by worshipping the Lord according to their activities. Sve sve karmani abhirata sam siddhim labhate nara. This is a verse from Bhagavad Gita, in 18th chapter, verse number, one second. Verse number, verse number 45, 1845. The divisions of Varna and Ashrama are necessary to ensure the proper execution of duties and peaceful existence of everyone. But everyone is directed to worship the Supreme Lord, who is all-pervading. Yena sarvam idam tatam. Okay, so that is from the 18th chapter, 46th verse, second line of that verse. Yatak parvatir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam tamabhi swakarmana tamabhyarcha siddhim vindanti manava. That's another very important verse. And then it says, the Supreme Lord exists vertically and horizontally. Otam protam. So that is in this verse, or the previous verse. Otam protam. Yes, that's in previous verse 6:3:12. The Supreme Lord exists vertically and horizontally, otam protam. And therefore, if one follows the Vedic injunctions by worshipping the Supreme Lord according to one's ability, his life will be perfect, as stated in Srimad Bhagvatam 1:2:13. Atak pumbir dvijasrestas varnashrama vibhagasaha swanustitasya dharmasya samsadir haritoshanam. O best among the twice-born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging his prescribed duties, dharma, according to caste divisions and orders of life, is to please Lord Hari. This is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.13. The Varnashrama institution offers the perfect process for making one eligible to return home back to Godhead, because the aim of every Varna and ashrama is to please the Supreme Lord. One can please the Lord under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, and if one does so, his life is perfect. The Supreme Lord is worshipable, and everyone worships him directly or indirectly. Those who worship him directly get the results of liberation quickly, whereas the liberation of those who serve him indirectly is delayed. So if you worship Radha Krishna, that is direct worship of the Lord. If you worship a demigod, that's indirect worship of the Lord. So therefore your liberation is delayed. It's still possible that you can get liberation, but that's only if you meet a pure devotee of the Lord, a Vaishnava, a pure devotee. The word namabir vachi are very important. Yeah, that's in the first line of this verse 13. Yo namabir vachi janam nijayam. In the Varnashram institution, there are different names: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasi. The Vak, or Vedic injunctions, give directions for all these divisions. Everyone is expected to offer obeisance to the Supreme Lord and perform duties as indicated in the Vedas. Okay, so your homework for next week, Saturday, is to research what are the main laws of nature that all living entities are following. There are human beings, there's animals, there's insects, trees, plants. So they're all controlled by the laws of nature. But then there is a second set of rules and regulations that have to be followed specifically by human beings and those above human beings, like the demigods. And that's called Varna and Ashrama. Okay, so your homework is to write down the main tenets, T-E-N-E-T-S. Those are principles or rules of the laws of nature that all living entities are forced to follow, and a brief summary of the Varnashram Dharma rules also that all human beings and superior beings like demigods are required to follow. So this is very important to know because, as I've said before, there's two sets of laws that we have to know. The laws of the state, like we're living in the United States and specifically in Washington State. So we have federal laws and state laws and city laws. We're living in the city of Seattle. So you have to follow those laws. And you have to follow the laws of nature established by Krishna. So what are those laws of nature? So I'll give you a general idea, and then I want you to research this more thoroughly. First, that no one is independent. in the material world. Everyone and everything depends on Krishna. So the idea we are independent, it's false. We are all independent. And how do we become, we're all dependent. How do we become dependent? First, by the influence of the modes of material nature. That's the first law of nature. The modes of material nature control the activities of the living beings and thoughts. Number two, we're controlled by the process of birth, death, old age, and disease. So there's no way we can get out of that, those limitations on the material body. There's no such thing that, in the future we won't have to die, we'll be able to use nanotechnology, or we'll be able to do this or do that, and people will be immortal in this body. That's nonsense. Don't believe it. It's not possible. So, because there's the law of nature is that everything in this material world, every person, everything, goes through 6 stages. They're born, they grow, they stay, they give off byproducts like children, they dwindle, and they die. And they experience birth, old age, disease, and death. Law of nature. No one can get out of this law of nature. Okay, so that's 2. And number 3, everyone is forced to eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Law of nature. Okay, some people can choose not to reproduce. Fine. But that possibility is there. But most people do. Eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Okay. And then there are 5 types of ignorance that control people. There is Tamishra, Andra-Tamishra, Tamas, Moha, and Maha-Moha. And then there's also the another law of nature is that it is impossible to overcome the force, the forces of nature, the force of nature, or the energy of nature, by any material manipulation. Daivihi esa gunamai mamamaya duratyaya. Very, very difficult, impossible actually, to overcome the force of nature, this gunamai. However, if one surrenders to Krishna, they can easily cross beyond this ocean of ignorance called the material world. Okay. And then there is also 6 kinds of material pangs or miseries: hunger, thirst, old age, death, lamentation, and illusion. And there are 3 symptoms of material disease. That is, again, this lamentation, there's the mirage of illusory things, and being afraid of supposed enemies, or thinking that you have enemies. And then also the laws of karma control us, the laws of action and reaction, which are very subtle. Okay, so these are some of the laws of nature. There are more. So you try and write down as many as you can, research it. What are the laws of nature established by Krishna? Okay, and then in this purport, it says, in this material world, everyone is conditioned regardless of who he is. One may be a human being, a demigod, or an animal, tree, or plant, but everything is controlled by the laws of nature, and behind this natural control is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed by the Bhagavad Gita, by Bhagavad Gita 9:10, wherein Krishna says, Maya dakshina prakriti sriyate satsratra. The material nature is working under my direction and producing all moving and non-moving beings. Thus Krishna is behind the natural machine which works under his control. So also, look up the verse, 18th chapter, verse number verse number 61. And yes, in this verse it says, the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma and is directing the wanderings of all living beings who are seated as on a machine made of material energy. Well, that's a very important verse. And it is related to this verse, Maya dakshina prakriti sriyate satsratra, 9:10. So explain how these two verses are related. And both verses basically say that material nature is working under the direction of Krishna. In other words, he's behind the natural machine which works under his control. This material nature is functioning like a machine, and it's completely controlled by the Lord. So those two verses, 1861 and 9:10. And then, lastly, there's another set of rules and laws that we have to follow. So, apart from other living entities, a living being in the human form of body is systematically controlled by the Vedic injunctions in terms of the divisions of Varna and Ashrama. So then, explain this other set of laws that we have to follow, laws and rules, called Varna Shram Dharma. A human being is expected to follow the rules and regulations of Varna and Ashrama, otherwise he cannot escape punishment by Yamaraj. The point is that every human being is expected to elevate himself to the position of a Brahmana, the most intelligent man, and then one must transcend the position to become a Vaishnava. So, explain the difference between a Vaishnava, a Brahmana, and a Vaishnava. Okay, so that's good homework assignment. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Okay, now Sanmukh also did homework. I didn't read it, but I'll read it. No questions? I don't have any at the moment. Okay. All glories to Prabhupada ki jai.